If you feel uncomfortable in downward facing dog, or if you feel like the pose is not really doing anything for you, then this video is for you. Downward facing dog is actually quite a complex pose. There's a lot going on. So my dog friend Birdie here, myself, we're going to break it down into the component actions and show some modifications so you can get the maximum benefit from it. Okay, it might just be me. We'll see if Birdie comes back later. When I started practicing yoga, I really did not like downward facing dog. If a teacher told me to relax in downward facing dog for 5 breaths, I would honestly think, fuck you. There's no way my body can relax in this position. My shoulders would be screaming out in discomfort. My wrists wouldn't feel good. My legs would feel too tight to find any kind of relaxation. These days, this has all changed. I now love the sense of spaciousness I find in downward facing dog. I can stay there for 10 minutes. I feel like a dog or even a lion that's unfurling, unraveling, regaining my length and strength. If you're starting out in your yoga journey, you may be wondering why we do so many downward facing dogs. Well, part of the intention is to lengthen and decompress the spine. So we're often forward folding or we're back bending. The downward dog brings us back to a kind of neutral lengthening position of the spine. It's also a position where our hips are higher than our head. So that's stimulating blood flow, calming the mind, energizing the body. We're going to be coming up and down into downward facing dogs so you can get a felt sense of the modifications as I walk you through them. So start by coming on to hands and knees. Shoulders are above the wrists, hips are above the knees. And we're going to come up once just so you can have a baseline for what you're feeling. Tuck the toes, lift the hips high. Hips are lifting up and back. Press through the hands and notice what that feels like. Now tune in to your spine. Get a sense of the shape of your spine. Now bend the legs lots, so that your stomach is on the thighs. Now notice what your spine feels like. Come down. So we're going to start this tutorial with the legs bent. The reason is often our hamstrings are tight or our calves are tight. So by bending the legs, we take this out of the equation. This allows us to find more length and space in the upper body and in the spine. Come back to all fours and look at your hands. Hands are forming part of the foundation of downward facing dog. Your hands should be at least shoulder width apart. But if your shoulders are tight, which they are for most men, I suggest you take the hands wider. But all these suggestions, you try them out and see what feels better. So you can come up to downward facing dog, keep the knees bent, notice what it feels like. Now take the hands a little bit wider and notice how it feels. Another thing you can do if you're feeling tension up around the shoulders is rotate the hands a little bit outwards so the fingers are pointing out. This allows the shoulders to open and what's called externally rotating. So if you take your hands out in front of you and now you rotate your palms to the sky, that action is called external rotation. So come back, you're rotating the hands up, externally rotating. Do it again and pay attention to what your shoulder blades are doing. So as you externally rotate, my shoulder blades are moving away from my ears, down my body, and they're moving apart from each other. This is internally rotating, and this is externally rotating. And it's the external rotation that allows space in the neck and shoulder area. That's what we want in downward facing dog. So place the hands again at least shoulder width apart. If your shoulders are tight, turn the hands a little bit outward. Tuck the toes, and an exhale, come back to downward facing dog. And here look to externally rotate. As you externally rotate the shoulders, the inner elbow creases will move towards each other and then forward. Check you've no tension in the head. So you nod the head, turn the head left and right, and come down. Now, if this is still feeling uncomfortable for your shoulders, take a couple of blocks or bricks. You place the bricks again, shoulder width apart. Place the hands on the bricks and then come into downward facing dog, knees bent. Pressing the hands into the blocks and come down. So the blocks allow us to shift more weight back out of the arms. That's an option that's there for you. And please do use these options. By using the modifications, we can actually advance quicker. So if you don't need blocks, put the blocks aside. And this time, tune in to what your hands are doing. So the hands are pressing down and forward, and it's the knuckles pressing down that protects the wrists. That wrist pain I used to get because I worked on a computer a lot. My wrists were very tight. Plus the wrist joint is not created to bear a lot of stress. So pressing down through the knuckles allows the wrist creases to lift. So again, this time, come back, tuck the toes, back in downward facing dog, but press down and a little forward through the knuckles, and notice the creases of the wrists lifting. Particularly press down through the thumb knuckle and the index finger knuckle, so the inside arms, whilst continuing to externally rotate the arms. Come down. So if you notice, as we externally rotate the arms, the hands want to open up, but we don't want that. We want to keep the inner edges of the hands pressing down. So we almost get this coiling up through the arm. This is externally rotating the shoulders, but actually the hands are staying pressing forward. So I'm grounding down through knuckles and the thumb, index finger, whilst externally rotating the shoulders. We're going to come up again, and this time really press through the arms, straighten the elbows, moving the chest backwards towards the hips. Tuck the toes, bring yourself up, press through the hands, straighten the arms, bringing the chest back onto the thighs for our bent legs. Notice, can you find any more space in the shoulders, in the neck, external rotation, and come down. So even that is already quite a lot of work and opening for the shoulders. Let's talk about the neck and the head. So classically, we will keep the neck in line with the arms. I'll show you. So classically, the head would be like this. I suggest you relax the head, dropping it, looking back through the legs. We all carry a lot more tension in our neck than we need to, so I suggest you just let it go here, let the neck relax. Again, these are all different options. Try it out, see what feels best for you. So this time we're going to come up and we're going to place our attention on the hips, moving the hips up and back, and also on the legs. Now the legs are active, even though we're keeping the legs bent here. Let's activate the legs, the kneecaps lifting up. Tuck the toes, exhale yourself up, downward facing dog. So working, bringing the hips back,
Notice how that lengthens the sides of the body. As you press through the arms, the armpits are lengthening, sides of the body are lengthening, chest is moving back, the hips are moving up and back. And start to activate the legs. And come down.
Next round, we're going to straighten the legs. If the backs of your legs are very tight, I suggest you walk out the dog, so you press one heel down, then lift it, then one other heel, and just alternate, straightening one leg, bending the other. And that will give you a beautiful stretch down the calf and hamstring of the straight leg. Otherwise, if your legs are straight, really work and moving the thighs backwards. The kneecaps are lifting. Tuck the toes, come up. Hips are moving back. Thighs are active. Kneecaps are lifting. Take a couple of breaths. And come down. So like I said, there's a lot going on in downward facing dog. You can take one or two things each time you come into downward facing dog and think about them. In almost every yoga class, there's a lot of downward facing dogs. So each one, pick a couple of things. Okay, this time I'm going to work in externally rotating the arms. This time I'm going to work at pressing down through the knuckles. This time I'm going to work at lengthening my armpits and sides of the body. This time I'll think about the hips moving up and back. This time I'll think about engaging the legs. For those of you that already have quite a stable downward facing dog, you can think about drawing the ribs in. There's a tendency to stick the ribs out in downward facing dog. Let me show you like this. If I draw the ribs in, it engages the core. Actually allows me to get more length in my spine. And this is also a great practice if you're working towards handstand, where we tend to stick the ribs out. So just drawing the ribs in will also help your handstand. If this is still feeling very uncomfortable, I've got another pose for you to do. It's called push wall. And this is lots of the same actions here. We're pushing our hands into the wall whilst we're externally rotating the shoulders. We're finding length in the sides of the body. I'd love to know how you get on, so please leave me a note or a question in the comments below. I've got a series of yoga pose tutorials that I'm releasing, so please check out my tutorial playlist and hit subscribe. Be well.